Alright, what is up everybody? Welcome back to another video. It's been like a week, so it's time. We are doing damage tracing. In the last video we set up this weapon trace, so let's also make sure it can actually damage stuff. If we run over here, you will likely see that the trace actually hits stuff, so that is fine. So let's also make sure that we can damage NPCs or whatever we want to damage. You can see it hits stuff. So yeah, let's do it. We probably need to set up base NPC. We will see if we actually do NPCs with the game animation stuff, because it is probably not the most performant thing to do with a million NPCs, but let's see. We have some characters. I'm gonna put it in here. Gonna make a new component just for the sake of it. Actually, I don't need to do that yet. Let's make a blueprint class character BP master NPC. So so we have something to actually damage. That's my point here. Do we have? Gonna do the mannequin. Open up. Gonna set the mesh to be this mannequin mesh. 270, I think. Yeah, there we go. And gonna grab this material. Just this look. I'm just gonna drag in the blue material here. So our NPCs are now blue. That is fine. So if I now grab the weapon, work. Annoying with the camera, there's also no collision. Is there no collision? On lock. Let's go into our sandbox character and have a little look-see. Pawn, I'm gonna set it to block pawns just so we don't pass through. This guy, yeah, makes it a little nicer. Alright, so I assume we're tracing on the visibility channel. I can't remember, but let's check. That ignores visibility, that also ignores visibility. So that's likely why we can't hit this. So here you have to make a decision. Depending on the type of game you're doing and how accurate you want the trace to be, we can either just damage this capsule, or we can do it with the mesh. I'm gonna do it with the mesh. So we're gonna set it to visibility overlap because we're damage tracing, we're weapon tracing for the visibility channel. I'm doing the mesh just because if we want to do projectiles, maybe a gun or something later, it doesn't look too good if you shoot like over here. So you want to be able to just like shoot on the mesh. And it also... Oh, that still didn't work. Block maybe. Sorry. There we go. So you can see we hit the hand there and we also hit up there in the head. So we are detecting hits. So that is good. So let's now go into our components. And we have this perform weapon trace, so we now add a branch. Gonna do this no matter if we hit or not. But if this trace hits something, we now need to determine if it's possible to damage it or not. And there's a couple of ways we can do this. We are going to... Yeah, there's multiple decisions when it comes to this. I will run the trace on the actual client. So the trace itself is client authoritative. Because I believe that most of you that are watching will probably make a smaller scale multiplayer game where it's not super important that everything is server authoritative. If you're making a multiplayer game that is competitive, you probably want the server to run this trace. The downside to that is that it's a little bit harder to client predict. You could also run this trace on both the client and the server and let all the particles for the hits play on the client first and then just send the damage over the server. That's also a fairly good way of doing it. So so how do we do this? I need to think a little bit. We need a server event. Server send hit. And we need something to damage, basically. And as I said, I want to make this fairly component based. So we're going to make a component. Actor component, AC NPC. We're going to add this AC NPC. And there's a couple of ways we could now detect this trace. If it was a hit, we can get this hit actor. And this is where we need to think a bit about how we're referencing stuff. So we could do get component by class. AC NPC. The downside to this is that when we do this, we actually have we load this is kind of like casting here, like get component by class will load this AC NPC into memory. So if I go to my components here now and get the size map, I likely have the AC NPC here. Actually, I don't, so maybe that's fine. I think it should be here. I think this might not update yet, or it's because it's not plugged into anything. That's weird. Sometimes you need to restart the editor for it to work. Okay, that's probably fine. Yeah, okay, no, sorry, here it is. It's just very small since there's nothing in it. But you see that our combat component now references the NPC component, so they are the combat component will always load the NPC component into memory, even if there's no NPCs in sight or loaded into the game or whatever. So that's less good, I would say. Also depends on the game you're making. Not everything is as terrible as it seems just because you load one thing into memory. But still, best practice is probably not to do this. So instead, we are gonna do find components by tag. And we're just gonna do actor component, which is a base class, so it doesn't really matter. It's there anyway. And we're gonna do a tag called damage. So if we hit an actor that contains a component with the tag damage, we can damage the actor. And this is good because we now have the NPC components here. So we're gonna add the tag damage. And because in the future we might not only want to damage NPCs, right? We might have breakable barrels that have another component. So in that case, we just add this damage tag to that component as well to be able to damage that. And in this AC NPC component, just gonna add a custom event for now. This is also something I see people do a lot, because if we did this with get component by class, people do this because they want to be able to get that event, right? So receive damage. So now I have this event. So it's a quick way to actually get that event. But I've also seen some Reddit threads where people ask, like, should I use a component or should I use an interface? The answer is you should do both. So here we have a soft base class reference to a, or not a soft reference, but we have access to the component without referencing it. So now we also need an interface. And I'm gonna do a blueprint interface called BI combat. Because we have the combat component, right? But that's relevant to our combat actor component. BI combat general will be things like receiving damage and stuff that can go to any actor, basically. So receive damage, and we're just gonna do a float for, actually we're gonna do a hit result. No, we're not gonna do a hit result because the hit result contains actors and stuff, so it's a fairly big struct. So we're gonna just send damage, and then we're gonna pass on stuff that we need without actually using the actor. So we're gonna start by damage. And now we have this interface call. See, we can now call receive damage here to send it to this component. But before that, we need to actually send it to the server. So server send damage. Gonna make this reliable. And the input will be actor component. And drag this through. So now we can do the server, receive damage here. Send damage, sorry. And we're gonna do a damage number of 10. And if I now go into this NPC component, I need to add the interface that we made, which is the combat general. And just gonna rename this to my prefix that I use. So event call receive damage, and we can print string this. Gonna append can pass through the number. And I believe that's it. Let's see, receive damage 10. Okay, perfect. So we are now sending damage. The issue here though is you can see that one swing sends a lot of damage because we're hitting multiple times, right? So we need a way to check for that. So we are gonna create a new variable here called already damaged actors. It will be a actor reference array. Before we send this, we will check if this array contains the hit actor. And as long as it doesn't hit the actor, we will add the actor to it before proceeding to send the damage. So this means the first time we hit, we're gonna proceed, which means we're gonna add that actor to the already damaged actors before sending the damage, which means for the next time we hit, this will be true, so we won't do any damage. So you will now see that I can only damage these actors once, hopefully. See, once. The issue is that I also need to clear the array at some point. And a good way to clear this array is obviously when the weapon trace ends, we can clear this. So clear the array so that next swing can trigger damage again. It's gonna comment stuff up. Set initial weapon sockets for the first frame of the swing. And that should work. Let's see, once per swing. Perfect. And if I have two NPCs, I should now hit both in one swing. Yeah, because it works. Perfect. There is still some things here, it's not completely finished. There's a lot of stuff that happens when you hit an enemy, right? It's not just receiving damage. There's probably gonna be some particle effects and stuff like that as well. And that's all fine and dandy. But that's where client prediction comes into play as well. So what we're probably gonna do in the next video is once the client detects the damage here, we're probably gonna play the particle effects and hit effects on the client, and then send the damage on the server. That feels like a fairly good way of doing it. Alright, that's gonna be it for this one. See you in the next one.